Now, the APC is hoping, of course, that it will be them and that they will be voted into power for a second term. And one of the people charged with helping to achieve this monumental task is the APC Director of Strategic Communications, Tonye Princewill. And he joins me now in the studio. Good to see you.
Thank you, Charles.
And happy holidays. I understand you relaxed a bit.
I did.
Over the period. Well deserved, if you ask me.
I would say so, yes.
And of course, to get to the promised land, as we said at the intro there, which for you is re-election, you and your APC party will have to get past the trenches and the ditches and the dugouts that have been carefully laid by an opposition that may be in political wilderness for now, but remains undepleted and unspent. So it most definitely won't be easy slipping through their obstacle course, will it?
No, it will not. First of all, let me just correct you in that I am the Director of Strategic Communications, but for Rivers State as opposed to
for
APC
Rivers State,
National.
right? Okay.
But yes, it's going to be a tough election. We're looking forward to it, rather than campaign on propaganda and hype. We want to campaign on the issues, and I think so far so good.
So what is your strategy? Because even though you are the Strategic Communications Director for Rivers State, that in microcosm is Nigeria, and I'm sure you cooperate with the bigger, sort of the national part of that strategic communications. You've started off deploying President Buhari last week to Arise News and This Day newspaper in a wide-ranging interview that appears to have worked positively in the president's favor, showing him off as a disciplined, honest, and rather almost surprisingly likable leader, and to some extent dispelling misgivings about him being unfriendly, rigid, and sort of obstinate. I mean, but of course that's not enough to consolidate the line for the president, is it?
No, but it's a start. I think I'm glad you said surprisingly likable, but the truth is that everyone who knows him very well knows that he is a likable character.
Yeah, but why doesn't the rest of Nigeria know him? I mean, he's a servant of the people. He's supposed to represent the people. Why doesn't he come out and show his true colors?
Well, you've just said it. He does. He is doing
that
now.
Well, he did. That's probably the first interview he's given, arguably, since he came into office.
You've got a country with lots of issues, and someone needs to roll up their sleeves and get to work. Public relations, image management isn't or wasn't the priority, still is not. But you're right, he needs to show people the other softer side to him, and I'm glad that he's doing that.
And so is it your sense that everything seems to be going well for the APC right now? Because I mean, I can't believe that it is. There is always a fly in the ointment, and the question is, what is that fly?
Well, look, is the glass half full or half empty? We want to say that the glass is half full. We're positive. We are optimistic. I can't see a PDP victory, but we're not complacent, so we're going to work for our own victory. You asked what the strategy is. The strategy is, what's the track record? What has he done? We need to let Nigerians know what he's done. We need to campaign on the issues. We need to tell people that this is a positive image. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, we've not overcome those challenges. But you need to roll up your sleeves and get to work, and there's no doubt about it that he's doing that.
Well, talking about flies in the ointment that could possibly derail your hopes, or certainly dent your hopes, let's talk about your state, Rivers State. I mean,
gladly.
It's consistently been a very messy election for as far back as I can remember. It is a state that has, I mean, all the indices, all the assessments by international as well as local observers is that a flashpoint in this election is going to be Rivers State.
Well, look, the let me call them indicators may not be favorable, but all they are indicators. The actual facts remain that it's much more peaceful than it was predicted to be. We've had a campaign. So far, so good. Yes, a few incidents here and there, but it could have been a lot worse. I think what you have to understand is that as far as the APC in Rivers State is concerned, we have a responsibility to, at least on our own part, play down violence. We have to, on our own part, also remember that it's not just about physical violence, it's also about tone. So your messaging, if it's peaceful, sends a peaceful signal across the state. So what we've got is a candidate who is peaceful. He's a pastor. But besides the talk of what he is,
well,
actually...
Which candidate are you talking
I'm talking about the candidate of APC, obviously.
Well, because...
the candidate of PDP is clearly not a pastor. I think the whole world knows that. So it's...
No, but what I'm saying is that the candidate you're
Yes.
talking about, the APC is mired in disputes right now about who is what and what is where.
I think it depends on how you look at it. There's no doubt about it, there's controversy, but there's always going to be controversy. There's no... I mean, friction is a function of interaction, so there's going to be that.
Yeah, but you've got two people coming out and saying they're candidates.
Well, I can get up and say I'm a candidate. It doesn't make me one. The INEC has recognized Tonye Princewill as the candidate. It's pretty clear. The party... I mean, if you're going to be a candidate, there's no independent candidacy. So if you're going to be a candidate, you have to be a candidate of a party. So the party has said Tonye Princewill is the candidate. INEC has recognized that as well.
Yeah, but is that potentially going to be a flashpoint? Because
you mean the state or
problem,
the issue?
Well, the issue. The problem is that all these things are potential triggers for violence as you go towards the elections. I mean, that's what you've had issues like that in the past. Everybody gets nervous when you talk about Rivers State.
I know. Our job is to make sure that we dial down that. I mean, the tone is very important. Tonye has come out, he's peaceful, even though he's had people laying claim to his throne. He said, look, let's talk, let's make peace. I think he was here on this station a few
Yes, I interviewed Tonye in Lagos. He's quite a gentleman.
Yes, he is. So when you have a gentleman, if you want to keep throwing stones at him, ultimately you realize nothing is being thrown back. So we want to take a responsible position, which is that ultimately we need peace. We can't get River State moving unless we have security addressed. We can't have jobs unless we have business. And you can't have business if the place is insecure. I'll give you a typical example. Just looking at statistics, the kidnapping report for November alone, nationwide, had 44 kidnappings. 29 of those 44 kidnappings were in River State alone. So the message really is that we need to turn that around. And the only way we can do that is with a new, fresh breath of air. And we don't do that with 66% of kidnappings in the whole country coming from one state. There's a problem.
Why do you think there's so much kidnapping? And what is your solution? What's your security solution? You're the strategic communications director. What is your strategy?
Well, I think, I'm glad that we've come from similar backgrounds and you understand that in developed countries, it's not just about physical security, but also social security. If you can't get people engaged, if you can't deal with youth unemployment, then you're going to have idle hands, and idle hands obviously will become a workplace for devils. So what we want to do is get people back working. And the way to do that really is to give people hope, to start to talk peace. If you start to talk peace, you can get the business community to be more confident, more interested. You want the headlines to be different about River State. You want them to be talking about peace, not talking about violence all the time. And so it all comes from leadership. It comes from style of leadership. I thought I'd learned a lot in politics until I met Tonye Princewill, and he told me, he said, look, we're not going to be throwing darts at the other side. Let them throw darts at us. We'll be peaceful. We'll look for peace.
So you're turning the other cheek then?
I have to.
Depending on what the other side, the bruiser, has to hit you with.
Well, he's going to be trying to hit us pretty hard, but obviously we're going to rely on our faith and we're going to rely on our hope that, people who are watching us realize that we don't mean any harm and we're not here for a kind of vindictive agenda. We want to get the state working, whether you're in PDP, APC, or whatever party you're in. You need to feel a part of River State.
Yeah, because you're obviously going to have to incorporate them.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're governing the state, they're people that you will govern.
Absolutely. So this whole APC versus PDP, Magnus Abe versus Tonye Princewill, we need to dial down that rhetoric. We need to start talking peace and we need to talk about leadership.
Right. Well, let's go beyond River State.
Yes.
Because as I said, you're a strategic communicator. You've actually operated on national levels, different levels. You've been a candidate, governorship candidate. I think you've also been potentially a presidential candidate. People have talked about you as, okay, you haven't quite got there yet.
No.
Okay.
The drugs are not that high.
When you do, come and talk to us. But let's talk about the issues that concern all Nigerians,
yes, of course,
including people in River State. And that is the bread and butter stuff. You're promising once again, you're being the APC, you are promising once again to transform the economy and create jobs. The same promise the APC made in 2015 and have failed, according to many Nigerians, to deliver on. Today, the rate of unemployment is higher than it was in 2015. In fact, it is arguably at an all-time high. And your plan is just seems rather thin on the ground about how this promised economic transformation will be achieved. So it's all right to say to us, we're going to do this.
No, I think...
But nobody seems to know how it is going to be done. Even the president didn't seem to know when he was interviewed on television. I mean, he kept saying, go and talk to my Minister of Agriculture and go and talk to this and that. It's like, well, I mean, you're the president, tell us.
I think you're being a little harsh. There's no doubt that the country is going through a very tough time right now. We met an economy that was nosediving, and obviously we needed to pick it up. These things don't happen overnight. I've always said that the first thing to do is acknowledge the problem. You can't go from where we were to nirvana overnight. If you had a toothache and the dentist wanted to treat you, he would more than likely have to pull it out, which is put you through pain. If you say that you want to avoid that pain and you want to continue with the uncomfortable position you're in, obviously you won't go through that tooth being pulled out. You might think that things are fantastic, but ultimately in the long run you could probably die of that. So what the president is doing is equivalent to pulling out the tooth. He's taking us through a very painful period, but it's all ultimately for our good. What I say to people when they ask me about the conditions, I say, look, ask yourself one question, and that is your money being spent properly? Or is it being carted away like it was being done back in the old days?
Well, how are they going to know that their money is being spent properly if it's not touching them?
Because, see, this
you can tell us things,
this is the question.
But
this is the question that I think is at the crux of everything. Even if it's not touching you today, we're assuring you that it will touch you tomorrow.
But you're giving assurances that have not been
backed up
by facts.
No, they are backed up by facts, Charles. You have infrastructure development at unprecedented levels. You've seen budget performances at unprecedented levels.
What budget performance?
Ask yourself this question. Are we spending more on infrastructure as a percentage of our budget than we ever have been?
Can I say
this is a basic question.
Okay.
And the answer is yes.
You've asked the question.
Yes.
But there are issues behind. There's something behind the headlines, as it were. The headline is, we're spending trillions of naira. But the question is, the value of the naira is less than it was a few years ago. So in order to spend the same amount, the same equivalent amount in dollar terms, you need to spend more naira.
Notice the question I asked was as a percentage of budget. So I'm saying that as a percentage of budget, our capital expenditure is significantly
higher. But I mean,
higher.
everybody knows that Okonjo-Iweala, when she was Minister of Finance, I mean, budgeted huge amounts. She was the one who dramatically reduced sort of recurrent expenditure and focused a lot on capital expenditure. I think and that's how that's what actually started. And I don't see. I mean, I don't see.
I think you're giving her much more credit than we. I mean, let's look at Lagos Ibadan. Let's look at the railway lines.
Well, you guys keep talking about Lagos Ibadan.
No, we don't keep talking about Lagos Ibadan.
Well, everybody I've spoken to talks about.
No, Lagos
That's
Ibadan.
the single thing you guys keep
Lagos Ibadan is a clear example of a project that has been awarded since the time of Obasanjo that was never executed. So this huge capital expenditure you referred to in the past, what was it used on?
Well, I can tell you this, that there were lots of roads that were built. I mean, I've driven through Port Harcourt and some of those places to
and
the
you
other
saw
side.
Roads?
No, not in Port Harcourt.
Okay.
I mean, I have to agree that Port Harcourt,
no, but I mean, the East-West Road, for
total
instance.
mess. But of course, you were part of the PDP at the time.
Not really, no.
So, but then if you look at the East-West Road and all that was controlled. I mean, anybody can point to something and say,
Charles,
this is what we have done.
Charles,
the railway that you're talking about.
The record expenditure in infrastructure has not happened before now.
Look, can I
now,
say this?
I want to just because I mean this is like splitting hairs. I mean it's clear that money has been spent.
Obviously, money is being spent.
Thank
I mean,
you.
all the other governments
and not
spent
just
money.
No, not just money, but significant amounts of money has been spent on capital projects. Now, if we don't make that investment in capital projects, ultimately, we will not be able to bring down the cost
Yeah,
of
but
business.
you're not telling us what you're spending. You've mentioned the Ibadan-Lagos
No,
road.
I wish...
You've talked about railways, but those railways, I mean, government is supposed to be a continuum. Those railways were started
I wish we had time
by
to
the
go
PDP.
through... No, not necessarily all the projects that were
Well,
done.
yeah,
were started,
but a lot of
even
those
if
railways were started by them, and you completed some of them.
It's not even so much as who started it. The fact is that your money is not being carted away. And as long as your money is not being carted away, ultimately you will feel the benefits of that expenditure.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. That is the reality of it. Now, when you had corruption, the money wasn't being spent. When you had 2.4 billion naira being spent on party campaigns, then you're not spending it on the people. That's the difference.
Well, let's move on and talk about another very big issue, and that is something that we still don't know about, how you're going to resolve Nigeria's security challenges, of course, in River State as well, which is one of the reasons you gave for asking for the votes of people in 2015.
I would be the first person to admit that security challenges continually exist. Exists worldwide, not just, of course, in Nigeria. But I would like to believe that you would agree with me that the security challenges we're facing today are significantly different from what we were facing in 2015.
Well, not really.
Significantly different in the context of the Boko Haram issue, and the extent of the problem is nowhere near what it is today.
Well, the Boko Haram is resurgent right now.
Resurgence, definitely.
Not only is it resurgent,
but it is not at the levels that it was.
You're saying at the levels.
It's not even anywhere near the levels it was in
Tonye,
2015.
Can I beg to disagree?
Please, explain
and the
it to me
reason
with
is
facts.
simply that when Boko Haram was being fought in 2015, 2016, when you initially, I mean, before you even came in, there was one Boko Haram. Okay? And so therefore it was easier for you when you came in to try and attack that one Boko Haram, and it was like a conventional war. The issue is that your strategy for fighting Boko Haram has not worked, and instead of defeating Boko Haram has metamorphosed into a multi-headed hydra. It is no longer just Boko Haram. It is Boko Haram, it is ISWAP, it is something else. There are fighters coming in from across Africa, from the Middle East, coming to... I mean, how is it that you can say that you're tackling security challenges, and the security challenges are getting worse?
Charles, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised at this, because...
Well, I'm asking you a question.
Let me put it to you this way. If I'm not mistaken, a few years back, and this was in 2014 or thereabouts.
Yeah, give us the thing about local governments and blah.
No, this day was bombed. Your offices. The security situation was significantly worse. There's no doubt about it that you go after a problem, and the problem will look for a way to fight back, whether it's corruption or whether it's Boko Haram. They will do that. But we have a much more equipped army. We have resources that are being put into the theater. We're not having resources carted away.
Well, first of
like
all,
we had in 2015.
The allegations of corruption that are taking place in the theater.
I don't know if I can be allowed to just make the point.
Finish.
That the way money was being carted away before, we have no evidence of that level of corruption. There's no doubt that there will always be bad eggs in any scenario. That always will be the case. But you won't pick up that and say, oh, there you go, same as before. It's not the same as before. It's far different. It's much better. Could it be better? Of course it could be better. Recently we heard about a resurgence going on in Borno State. That is being addressed. And my take on it is that you have a much more competent army, a much more equipped army, a better funded army. So without a shadow of a doubt, all these issues will eventually be overcome. But I don't want to accept that the problem we have today is worse than the problem we had before, or even close to the way it was before.
We could go on about this, but let's turn to other percolating matters of the day. And prominent among them is the move to put the Chief Justice of Nigeria on trial, a move that's been condemned by all the other parties, as well as the Nigerian Bar Association, civil society organizations, etc., not least because of the impropriety of the method of bringing him to trial, which allegedly flagrantly ignored due process. That what I want to know is, what is your reaction to that?
Well, look, just as you have people who have been condemning it, you also have people who have been commending it.
Well, only the APC has been commending it. In fact, the only group, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I'm not sort of taking the words away from you, but it's only the APC that's come out to say it supports the trial of the Chief Justice and what amounts to his public humiliation.
That's not true. That's the point I'm trying to make, that there are civil society organizations that have spoken in favor of it, and I'm sure there are many individuals, people whose voices are well respected, who have also spoken out in favor of it. Now, I come from the APC, so if I speak out in favor of it, it will be interpreted as being obviously partisan. But the reality remains that if there's wrongdoing, and that's for the courts to determine, then the chief judge will be sanctioned. But if he's innocent, he will be let free. For me, what worries me, and I recall a phone call I received earlier on today when someone said to me that they were condemning this as well until they saw the ferocity by which the PDP was condemning it, and they realized, maybe something's wrong here. We have Christian groups coming up and saying that, why would this be the case? We have South-South groups coming up and saying, why would this be the case? To
Why
me,
would what be the case?
Why would the chief judge be arraigned as is? So I would much rather we don't make this partisan and we don't make this political. This is a very sensitive issue. I don't think that this is the presidency or the president or the APC, sorry, going after the chief judge. I believe that this is the CCT going after him. To the best of my knowledge, I don't want to comment too much on it, but I'm not a lawyer, but the Constitution simply says matters like this can be addressed by the judiciary, not the executive. So talk about taking it to the NJC doesn't make any sense. It's very straightforward.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Now,
that matters like this can be addressed by the judiciary, not the executive.
Exactly.
Well, can I
so
put
this is where the NJC
right.
and calls for the NJC to be involved in it are baffling to me.
Well, can I put this to you?
Yes,
that
please.
The Code of Conduct Tribunal doesn't fall under the judicial arm of government. It falls under the executive arm. It's answerable to the president.
Can I ask you this?
So why is the Chief Justice being put before a Code of Conduct Tribunal that is not part of the judiciary?
Because the Constitution allows for the Code of Conduct Tribunal to be considered as a court that can handle issues of...
Well, that's disputable, because the
it's
Bar
not, it's in the court.
Association sitting here...
It's in the Constitution, and that's what baffles me more than anything else. I'm not a lawyer, and I see a lot of people talking, but they're not quoting the Constitution. In the Constitution, it says it quite clearly that the Code of Conduct Tribunal is one of the methods in which you can determine these kind of issues. It's quite clear. You wouldn't be taking it to the National Judicial Council because that's the executive. And it's absolutely clear that that is not one of the forums by which you'll address an issue like this.
Well, the National Judicial Council, anyway, it can't be part of the executive. I mean, it's headed by the Chief Justice.
Yeah, it's the chairman. But if you look at Section 135 of the Constitution, it makes it absolutely crystal clear that it is part of the executive. Look, for me, there are about at least 6 Supreme Court judgments that justify the position that is currently from 1968 upwards. So I just look at this and I think to myself, it's become too partisan. It's become too political.
Well, we could argue about
we should just wait, and if he's free, if he's innocent, he will be set free. But if he's not, then he should not be above the law.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on, because as I said, we could argue about this all day. Let's return to the campaign, which is the big issue right now.
It is, yes.
Is this election brimming less with the extraordinary political ingredients that would in the past have led to a toxic mix that often resulted in violence? Because of course both candidates are northerners, so that eliminates regionalism. Both are Fulanis, so that removes the ethnic element, and both are Muslims, so you don't have that religious divide factor.
No, I think you're definitely right. To that extent, it's a much more keener contest. At least it's a keen contest that doesn't have those elements in the foreground. That's a positive.
Right, but does that make your job as strategic communications director easier? I mean, I know you're in River State, but you're also part of the bigger picture.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as an easy job in strategic communications. It's a constant evolving process, and there's information and means of information flying around all the time. What I do think is going to happen here is that the issues become more pertinent. I think in this kind of scenario, the religious or tribal sentiments will be downplayed, and the issues will become much more
So
of an
given
issue.
that those issues are becoming, as you said, more to the fore,
Exactly.
I mean, does that mean that we're looking at a more progressive election campaign this time?
I would like to think so. I'd like to think so. Certainly, that's my hope. I've listened to sort of the message coming out from the campaigns. I'm happy with ours. I was a bit concerned that our opponents were spending more time focusing on us than on themselves and the message that they want to send. But if that's their strategy, then of course, fine with them. We want to focus on the track record so far. We want to recognize and acknowledge that things are difficult, but for a good reason, and that hopefully in the times to come, people will see very quickly the difference. We want to believe that the foundation that we're laying is that corruption is no longer acceptable, and that money must go to the people.
Right. And if this, as you said, is a more progressive election campaign and the whole thing around it is much more progressive, given that if an opposition candidate like Atiku or someone else is able to win this election, would that say to Nigerians and the world that there is now a better functioning democracy in this country?
Well, look, the truth of the matter is that it doesn't have to be that when you lose or when you win, that is when it is progressive. What should be progressive is that it's fair, that it's credible, and that it's free. And I think we should be able to achieve that. So far, so good. There's no doubt that there are bumps ahead, but I think we'll overcome all those bumps and achieve stuff. But we've got to ask ourselves some very key questions, which is not just about the candidates. Atiku is a very fine gentleman. I've worked with him severally. But the reality is that the party and the people of that party and the methodology of that party, you've got to ask yourself, is this a party that is a party of progressives? In the case of PDP, I think the answer to that is no.
Tonye Princewill, APC Director of Strategic Communications in River State, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Charles.